The Honourable Damien O'Connor.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. And it's interesting timing that this bill comes to the House when, as the previous speaker said, the TPP, well, we don't know what's quite in the agreement, but it currently lies before the corporations in the US and all those people over there, but not before the members of Parliament of this House. But we are told that there will be issues in there related to intellectual property protection. And there have been, and that's coming very narrow, Mr Speaker, that intellectual property protection is at the core of this piece of legislation. And it works both ways. And I guess if the members over the other side were to admit that actually the market doesn't always work, and you actually have to intervene to offer protection to people from both sides of the debate, whether it be the suppliers or be the users of, in this case, intellectual property related to chemical use. And we are, or have been in the past, and will struggle to remain there, some of the most efficient producers of food in the world, of safe food. And we're going to have to work really hard to maintain that reputation. And I do acknowledge some of the issues that the Greens raise here, because I don't think it's smart for any country or any producer of food to use more chemical than is absolutely necessary to produce the amount of food that we need. But it's not smart to produce more food and sell it at less value, which is also the mandate that the government seems to have taken on board. So the objective of this country must always be to produce the best quality food using the least inputs and the least chemicals to go to the highest value customers. And we should never forget that clear objective. Mr Speaker, what this bill does is provide a little bit of protection for companies that, in the true Kiwi way, innovate with products or with chemicals that are currently in use. So this is not at the heart of new chemicals. It's what you do with those chemicals, and we have in this country a number of chemicals that have been approved for use in certain crops or for certain weeds. And what Kiwis do, as is our inclination, is we say, oh, maybe we could use that on something else. Because if it bowls over Californian thistles, it might do Scotch thistles, or it might knock out black seed grass or something else that this government seems to have let into the country because of its poor biosecurity systems, Mr Speaker. And Kiwis tend to innovate. But there are, and there should always be, strict criteria over how chemicals are used. And so when companies bring chemicals into this country, they have to go through an extensive process through the AgCarm legislation and process, and then, of course, there has no legislation which says that we are not going to allow the use of any chemical that might in any way danger the health of anyone who consumes the products from the things that may be sprayed or affected by this. And we must uphold those standards. But when it comes to, as I say, new weeds that we might be trying to eliminate because of poor biosecurity standards, and there are an alarming number of new weeds and pests that come into this country every year because the national government's not got a strict and robust biosecurity system. So when farmers or horticulturists want to address this, they want to do so in a way that maintains the safety and integrity of the core product they are growing, be it apricots or apples or any kind of barley crop or whatever, you name it. So if a company that has a chemical that it uses on barley and someone, or no, let me go to actually a case in point that has been raised here, and it's with fodder beet, because we've seen a rapid expansion in the use of fodder beet in the dairy industry, and we've got many chemicals that are registered for Photica brassicas, but are strictly speaking not registered for fodder beet. And so when the farmers who are growing this rapidly expanding crop to feed their dairy cows want to control some of the weeds, they say, well, maybe we can just go and grab the chemical that we used on fodder beet. It might be all right for, for fodder, well, It might be all right on fodder beet, but it's been approved for fodder brassica, Mr. Speaker, and sorry to get a bit mixed up here. What companies can do is spend the money to use or to get certification and approval to use it on the fodder beet. But what happened is that then, having gained approval, the information was then available through the process that someone who just came along with a new chemical with the key active ingredient could say, well, we want to register our chemical as well. And the company that had done the research, done the certification process, then received no protection. I think it is reasonable that we offer some protection for the investment that those companies make in ensuring that we have the wise and safe use of those chemicals on a similar crop. So that's the reason that Labor will be supporting this to the Select Committee. But we're not going to give carte blanche approval to companies that are just going to come in and prevent innovation or other generic utilisation of chemicals in this country. We need to ensure there's a balance between innovation and protection of intellectual property. And Federated Farmers came along, as they often do, and I think it's a rather naive approach, and say, we just want open competition, we want to drive down our costs, and it's all going to be good. I think that's a very naive approach. I think they must accept that the companies that bring in these chemicals, and as a boysenberry or part-time or probably a fairly poor boysenberry grower myself, I'm very aware of application rates of the different active ingredients in many fungicides in particular that can be, and in fact boysenberries is a classic case where, as a small crop, companies have had to get approval to use fungicides used on apples or other things to be then used on boysenberries. There's a process they must go through to ensure that the consumers of boysenberries or boysenberry products are consuming safe products. So I can understand, as both a producer and as a legislator, I suppose, the need to have a sound balance in this approach. I'm not sure that the government has got the balance right. It doesn't. Well, it very rarely gets the balance right in legislation, I have to say, but we do trust the Select Committee to actually investigate all these things and to make sure that that we do get it right. So, Mr. Speaker, Labor will support this piece of legislation into Select Committee and to ensure that we get the balance right. But the objective is spoken by the Greens of having safe food products from this country is absolute, and we will not allow the contamination in any way of those food products by chemicals that are not designed to be used at the rates recommended and under strict conditions on the crops that they are registered for. And that's a core objective of this piece of legislation, I hope. And we say that leaving this open to the market forces, as the national government does in most of its thinking and legislation, would not be appropriate here. And I acknowledge that National, for once, is accepting the need for proper legislation for balance between the property rights of the chemical companies and the farmers and the protection of the safety of the consumers at the end. That's what we must ensure, and we in Labor here understand full well the need to get that balance right. The Select Committee will investigate that balance. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, Labor supports this legislation.
The Honourable Joe Goodger.